Hello, I'm Calvin Kam with Strategic Building Innovation and with buildingSMART USA. In this session, I will be joined by my global teammates, partners, and clients to highlight the importance of client-centric workflows, while I'll also take a step back to the last 20 years in which I've been working closely with a number of public agencies across 3 continents and also private developers, owners, and operators in the integration of client-centric workflows. In one of our ongoing projects, we are working with IFC, CityGML, and CCM to form an openBIM, openGIS data repository. The key is to make it scalable, repeatable, and informing at an urban city level scale. In this process, we are now working with well over 150 IFC models that we are checking and inducting into the BIM Data Repository. They are coming from a variety of BIM modeling applications from different authors through the use of IFC 2x3, IFC 4, and the key question we have is how do we ensure good quality assurance and good quality control? Of course, we know that individual BIM authors will need to be very diligent. Yet, from a client perspective, what more can we do to ensure that the quality is reliable? As we often see, that geolocation method may not be accurately used or standardized. There may be some IFC entity types that were incorrectly being used, and all these would have adverse impacts, in this particular case, sponsored by the Lands Department of Hong Kong. And in this case, we are able to work with an emerging standard called the Information Delivery Specification that has been started by the buildingSMART international community about 2 years ago, with the intent of coming up with a machine-readable information requirements that can be shared across different implementator software being used by different stakeholders. And the key is to also have an IDS XML that can be interchangeable and interoperable among different authors and software implementation. And one may wonder, what is the differences between more traditional file-based model checking versus what may be complementary with this IDS approach? Here comes one of my global partners, Mr. Hans Hendricks, joining us from the Netherlands.
My name is Hans Hendricks. I work as an independent BIM consultant in the Netherlands. Also work in the team of SBI, where we gained the first experience with IDS. Some experience that I have with ordinary BIM model checking. There are many issues that arise over and over. The model checking requires time and effort, and the result is depending very much on the person who is doing the model check. Some hurdles that I experienced. In many projects, the definition of what to deliver is unclear. Sometimes there is a lack of knowledge during the modeling, but also during the checking. And there are many manual settings with chance for errors. I see a lot of potential in using IDS. We are already noticing using IDS and creating guidelines that there is more attention to the process and in preventing the errors, as in quality assurance. Of course, the IDS Checker itself remains focusing on identifying issues. I'm happy and proud to be part of this SBI team, where we have the opportunity to develop IDS and this IDS Checker. It's an important step to increase the BIM quality by using buildingSMART IDS.
Thank you, Hans. Indeed, it's proud to be with the buildingSMART international community. Even though the IDS is only in its version 0.5, we have been working closely with our global team to identify what may be some opportunity to apply IDS for this agency-wide, territory-wide BIM and GIS data repository. In fact, we are coming up with some criteria that my colleague, Dr. Min Song, will be sharing. Min is joining us from California.
This is an example of specification we selected. And this specification was important to us because one of the things that you have to do in order to create a large urban scale model is to make the models very light. Because in the end, there will be hundreds or thousands of models, IFC models in the data repository or the 3D map. And if the model size is large, it's not going to perform well. So what this specification is doing is checking whether all the IFC furnishing elements have been excluded from the model, so that in the end, it helps making the openBIM and GIS integrated database or the platform very light. Another example of a specification here. So here, this is related to geolocation, and if you see in IFC, we have multiple ways of georeferencing your model. So even within only IFC 2x3, you have multiple ways of georeferencing, and IFC 4 has its own way of georeferencing. But the thing is, not all of those methods are ideal for our purpose. Ideally, when you upload an IFC model to a 3D map, you want it to automatically find its correct position on the 3D map. But some of the methods don't really have all the required information to do that. So for us, it's important to pick the best method, which in this case was the approach that's being used in IFC 4. So here the specification is checking whether the IFC 4 georeferencing is being used or not.
Thank you, Min. And be agile. Let's not wait for the IDS to be fully vetted and to be to slow down for maturity. Let's go ahead and implement it. So this is what we have done. We are working closely to go implement IDS, in our case using both BIM.works as well as Simple BIM. And you can see that without IDS implementation, it would be much more difficult to check the thousands of instances where the simplification may not be done appropriately, or that the naming convention or the object classification may not be following the standard. So how does IDS work? Let's hear from Ruben with BIM.works, joining us from the Netherlands.
I will be running the model checks for IDS Hong Kong. And what you will see here is all the different checks with the numbering that we've used in the Excel sheets that have been communicated and the work report. And each number corresponds with one of the checks. So it's not a, so these are 13 or 12 checks. Green means that it is a success. Red means that it is an error. And you can drill down for each check to see more details. So what you can do is you can click this button and, for example, say I only want to see the errors. So you are filtering the 3D view by showing only the objects that are identified as being errors. And you can see that these are indeed the IFC furnishing element objects in this model. So if you click on an object, you can see the type here, furnishing element, IFC furnishing element. So these are all errors in this model, according to this IDS check.
And on top of the IDS, as agreed upon by BSI community, we understand that our client may also want further custom checking that may go beyond what IDS currently allow in version 0.5. So let's not stop. Let's also go work with commercially off-the-shelf technology to customize for them. Min will explain that a little bit further.
In the end, we had around 14 specifications we wanted to check. But one challenge was that not all of them could be checked with a buildingSMART's IDS standard, because buildingSMART's IDS standard is somewhat limited to non-geometry checks, and also if you have multiple attributes and properties that need to be cross-evaluated at the same time, it's not easy to do so with buildingSMART's IDS standard. So for those more difficult ones, we decided to use other commercial tools like Simple BIM for checking. And for the IDS check following the buildingSMART IDS standard, we focused on the ones that you see here. and those were programmed into the IDS XML.
So in a nutshell, we want to focus on quality assurance and quality control. It's a matter of empowering both the repository gatekeepers to be able to run IDS checks and also supporting the BIM authors, empowering them as well with good IFC guidelines that have the schema, that have the IDS in mind. Sure, there's still a lot of responsibilities that we need to work with, and this is an active project that is work in progress. We look forward to sharing back with the buildingSMART community as the project unfolds and looking forward to teaming up together. And indeed, the value of the IDS work is that it can empower the clients, the professionals, and the operators. And in fact, that reminded me of what took place 20 years ago. For the past 2 decades, I have been a researcher at Stanford University Sci Phi, where we were invited to work for the Finland government Senate properties in one of the first ever IFC applications in the world on the Aalto University renovation projects. At that time, we were drawing what we may call today a BIM diagram to identify that would IFC be in the center of this exchange? Can we have reliable bidirectional exchanges? And before long, we noticed that the technical reality would be different, that depending on the software implementation, some of the geometry, some of the information may not be dependent for a bidirectional and full fidelity exchange. Even though those were the challenges, it did not slow our team down from redeeming the promises of openBIM, such as 30 to 40% reduction of design documentation efforts, 50% time savings, and also much better value, lifecycle value that we could present for the facility management phase. But it's also because of those specific framework and client-driven requirements that has also helped another implementation of openBIM to be more specific and to have the end in mind. That was the third public agency that we want to feature in this presentation, which is the US General Services Administration. In between 2003 and for the next decade or so, we have been focusing on what are the client-centric requirements, such as space, such as energy, such as circulation security, or quantity, that were needing us to really come up with an understanding of what are the specifications. That led to one of the first model view definitions that were generated in the BSI community. And at that time, we contributed to some 6 of them, working closely with the vendor partners, working closely with the MVD experts. 2 of them were Richard C. and Neely, who will be sharing with his perspective of how we have also learned from such MVD approach to what we see as the IDS approach that we just talked about. Yili.
Hello, my name is Jiri Hietanen, and I am the co-founder and CEO of DataCubist. I have a long history with model view definitions, or MVDs, dating back to the Concept Design BIM 2010 project with the General Service Administration in the US, Stadsbygg in Norway, and Senaatti Properties in Finland. I was also the first MVD coordinator of buildingSMART International. Our current solution, SimpleBIM, is a further evolution of the MVD idea. Like MVD, it allows you to define what data is needed and to validate that the data is reliable and stored in the appropriate IFC data structures. MVD XML is the machine-readable representation of MVD, and we have an add-on to SimpleBIM that supports MVD XML in a little bit limited way, and it's done for Stadsbygg in Norway. But this is what it looks like. You have the model, and we can load an MVD XML file, and then we generate a SimpleBIM template based on this MVD XML data. And this SimpleBIM template is doing 2 things. First of all, it's creating groups for the validation, which we can see over here in the MVD validation groups. And it's applying the rules to those groups. And here you can see all the validation results for all of the groups. Pretty simple. We plan to support IDS in the same way that we support MBD XML. We don't have that support yet, but this is how it will look like. So here we have a very simple IDS requirement. It's basically saying that the model should not have any furnishing elements in it. And when we generate the corresponding simple BIM template, it will look like this. So first we generate a group that contains all the furnishing elements. And then we set a rule that this group must be empty. So this is doing the same thing as this IDS definition in the background. And in simple BIM, it will look like this. So this model has 17 furnishing elements. It shouldn't have any. So this is flagged as a problem.
Thank you, Yili. So with the MVD approach started with the US and later on also brought it to Finland and Norway, we have seen that by a better, clear communications about the information requirements or the specification or the manual, that we are able to even use IFC and BIM and computing technologies of the time to demonstrate and to prove that we are able to run over 60,000 simulation of security violations in a matter of seconds, be able to improve the efficiency of spatial program validation from 50% to 98%, and be able to dramatically reduce the time for such validation from weeks down to minutes. Beyond public agencies in 3 different continents, my SBI team has also been working with private real estate developers to leverage openBIM solutions such as IFC, BCF to bring value to make a more informed design, construction, and property management decision. Working with SHKP, we have applied openBIM approach and workflows to a number of commercial and residential as well as mixed-use projects. In one such project, we may be dealing with over 1,000 BIM files by a number of different design consulting teams using a number of different versions of the same application or different software applications at large. And we are able to bring them in through IFC to do model checking, to do model automation, and be able to then bring that in to meeting, such that during meetings when we have tens and tens of professionals spending valuable time, we can zoom in to where we need to make the most informed attention and decision. And so how to leverage BCF, it's also an emerging trend and workflow that we are standardizing through the use of our own developed Climate-Done solution to try to bring all the design, construction, rule set, and results into management attention. Reflecting back on the journey, it's also important to look forward to the future with all these open standard solutions in mind under the belt. Digital twin is certainly one of the more exciting future that is ahead of us. In fact, can we rely on the openBIM, openGIS repository that we just talked about to inform us with productivity and sustainability information? So let's hear from the Lands Department of Hong Kong, Nelson, about the vision of where we want to go beyond the IDS.
Now we are talking about the importance of IDS in planning and development of 3 phases of the BIM Data Repository. In phase 1, we harmonize the BIM standard provided by different contracts under government departments. Phase 2, we use the harmonized BIM data to update the 3D maps. In phase 3, we adopt the open standard in the BIM Data Repository to develop a BIM API in order to support other use cases such as valuations and territorialized 3D simulations.
Thank you, Nelson. And indeed, with such API, with such connectivity, we can do more than the static BIM, than the static asset representation. Such as back with the SHKP, we're able to turn one of the tallest buildings in the world to leverage IFC reliably and powerfully to allow us to not only benefit from BIM for facility management, asset management, but also connect that with different forms of Internet of Things, sensors, data that we can build upon. So in this project so far, we are starting to look into a portfolio of dozens and dozens of IoT networks, adding up to 3,000 and counting of individual sensors. Exactly where we can go with openBIM-based solutions and workflow, it still has a huge opportunity for all of us to team up together. But the key we want to highlight today is that technologies and standards may never be perfect, but rather staying back as a passive consumer and wait for complaints and wait for developments to fully take place, we should stay at the forefront to work with clients, to work with the openBIM workflow, and try to bring values into the forefronts. So once again, we're privileged to be here today at this international keynote and looking forward to teaming up with the buildingSMART international community for more workflows, for more client-centric value. On behalf of our global team, thank you for the attention.